Hey folks, Dan Gunther here. I know that this is primarily a Star Trek channel, but I did want to share some of my thoughts on the first episode of the new Star Wars animated series, The Bad Batch. So consider this your warning for spoilers if you've not seen the first episode of The Bad Batch or the Clone Wars or any of the ancillary material, and you care about spoilers. I would suggest stopping watching here. So first of all, I have to say, I'm known as a huge Star Trek fan, but I have been a fan of Star Wars for a very long time. I've watched through all of the Clone Wars. I've not seen all of Rebels yet, but I'm working on it. So my fandom doesn't run quite as deep as it does for Star Trek, but especially in recent years, I've become a much bigger fan of Star Wars as well, especially having married Nikki, my new wife of last year, who is as big a Star Wars fan as I am a Star Trek fan. So that's definitely influenced me a bit. I had previously watched, of course, all of the films, and the fact that I've watched all of the Clone Wars really helped me appreciate this new series, The Bad Batch. Now, I do have to say it does help to have watched all of the Clone Wars. I think there's a lot there that you might miss as far as nuance goes. That said, they do a fairly good job of bringing the viewer up to speed as to who the Bad Batch are, what the Clone Force 99 is, and their relationship and where it falls in the timeline and all that sort of thing. Now, speaking of where it falls in the timeline, I recall when they were announcing all of these new Disney Star Wars series, and there was a huge announcement of a ton of them. This was actually the one I was the least interested in. I've loved The Mandalorian. I'm all there for Book of Boba Fett. Obi-Wan Kenobi, I'm really looking forward to. Ahsoka, I can't wait to see. This one was kind of just like not really on my radar as one that I was really looking forward to. The Bad Batch, as they were introduced in the season 7 of the Clone Wars, was not something that excited me a great deal. I wasn't a huge fan of their characters. I was kind of meh on the whole concept and the whole story surrounding them. However, watching the trailers and getting a better sense of exactly where in the timeline this takes place really intrigued me. And the fact that it's kind of centered around Order 66 and that pivotal moment with the founding of the first galactic empire by Palpatine. I think that's just an incredible moment in Star Wars history. Really fun to explore what happens beyond that, beyond what we saw in Revenge of the Sith, which, for all of its issues, I think was the best film of the prequel trilogy. I'm not a big fan of The Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones, but Revenge of the Sith I found fairly enjoyable. And that whole formation of the Empire is really fascinating to me. So knowing that this takes place at that moment was a huge draw for me. So these characters, I think they're an interesting perspective, especially among the clones, because, they're generally not very differentiated. They're fairly monolithic. They don't have a lot of individual personality. Now, I should say they did many of them had very different personalities during the Clone Wars. And I think this series becomes a really interesting exploration of how that kind of gets bled away, because with the activation of the inhibitor chip and the execution of Order 66, the one that tells all of the clones to kill the Jedi, it seems that those personalities have kind of been wiped away, and the programming has really taken over, and we see that over the course of this episode. And interestingly, a lot of the personalized embellishments we see among other clones, such as Captain Rex or Commander Cody, we see that kind of wiped away here. We see the color being drained out of that, and everything becoming a little bit more just kind of monotone and monolithic, which is an interesting direction for them to go after we saw that kind of individualization in the Clone Wars. The effect that this order and this conditioning has had on the clones. But of course, the most colorful clones are the 5 that make up the Clone Force 99, the 4 augmented experimental clones, and of course Echo, who joined the team at the end of the Clone Wars. So I have to say, I very much enjoyed this episode. I loved the added length, the fact that it was around 74 minutes long. really helped them to kind of take their time with the story and flesh these characters out. One of my biggest complaints about these characters in the Clone Wars was that they were a little over the top. It was a little bit frenetic. But that is part of the problem with, we only see them basically in combat. It's been a while since I've watched that. I'd have to go back. But I feel like we got like those high intensity moments, and, you get the over the top characterizations, whereas this episode really gives you time to breathe with the characters and find them in those quiet moments, which really made me appreciate them a lot more. So even Wrecker, who is still a brawler, still kind of lunk-headed, over the top kind of character, I appreciated him a bit more this time around, because we see him and the rest of the team in those quiet moments, as I said. So over the course of the episode, we get the impression, of course, that Crosshair is the one member of the team who seems to not be rebelling against Order 66, and something is still compelling him to want to kill Jedi, and he repeats what kind of becomes a mantra: good soldiers follow orders, which kind of harkens back to a storyline in the Clone Wars when the inhibitor chip thing was revealed. So it's really interesting that they go this direction with this character. I really actually end up feeling very bad for the character over the course of the episode, because as Omega, who we'll talk about as well, as she says, it's not his fault. He can't control what's happening to him, and it ends up being quite sad that he's been programmed in this direction, and that he's following through on that and doesn't have the free will to kind of rebel against it like the others in Clone Force 99 seem to. I find myself wondering if there's going to be some sort of a redemption arc for Crosshair. And similarly, I feel really bad for the rest of the clones as well, who just kind of seem to have their personalities wiped away with the activation of these chips. Now, I mentioned Omega, who's a very interesting character, a young female clone, it seems, kind of an odd one out among the clones of Jango Fett that make up the clone army, as seen first in the film Attack of the Clones. She seems to have a very strong perceptive ability. She seems very empathetic, and at times almost telepathic in her dealings, especially with Crosshair when he's contemplating what he's going to be doing, and she's kind of trying to talk him out of it. She seems very in tune with the emotions of the people around her, as well as, like I said, maybe a little bit telepathic. And of course has the amazing sharpshooting ability that we see towards the end of the episode. So I'm curious to see what other abilities will manifest themselves in her. I'm wondering if they're hinting that she may be a little force sensitive in her, the way she deals with other people and the abilities she seems to have. So curious to see where that goes. Lots of potential in this character. Definitely on board with her being the kind of tag along of Clone Force 99, as they seem to be kind of on the run from the Empire now. Great little ties to continuity. Of course, in this episode, we get Grand Moff Tarkin, Admiral Tarkin at this point. Very well rendered here and very well played as well. Other ties to continuity, Saw Gerrera. It's great to see him. We saw him initially in the Clone Wars. We'll see him later, chronologically speaking, in Star Wars Rebels, as well as Rogue One, played by Forrest Whitaker in that film. So great to kind of tie it into that continuity and see those seeds of rebellion being planted here. I thought that was a lot of fun. And of course, the young Jedi Padawan who would become Kanan in Rebels. I thought that was a really neat tie. That story, of course, as I've learned from other sources, has been told before in comic form, playing out a little differently than what we see here, but still kind of hitting those main beats of the story. So yeah, really interesting. I like that they tie it into continuity, and that these important moments will kind of echo throughout the rest of the Star Wars universe and give rise to other stories as well. So yeah, I'm really curious to see what happens from here on out. We know that they're going to that planet at the end to meet with a possible ally. I think this is a clone we've seen previously in the Clone Wars. I don't want to necessarily spoil that for people who aren't looking for spoilers for upcoming episodes, but I think I know who they're referring to there. But yeah, very much looking forward to seeing where this series goes. Top marks, I think, to this first episode. I love the longer form version. I'm curious to see next week, or I guess later this week, as it transitions into shorter episodes, if they'll be able to kind of maintain that quality of storytelling. Also, just from an aesthetic point of view, this show is beautiful. I love the close-ups of the characters we get with that 3D animated style, but some of the tattooing on Hunter's face almost has like a hand-drawn feel to it. And the textures, I think, are just beautiful. A lot of care and work has gone into the series to make it look as beautiful as possible. So, yeah, lots of little storylines hanging on that we'll find out more. What are the motives of the Kaminoans, specifically the one who allows Clone Force 99 to escape? And what is the nature of Omega, and is she going to be what the Empire is chasing rather than maybe necessarily Clone Force 99? So yeah, really curious to see where all of this goes, but I would love to hear from all of you. What did you think of Aftermath, the first episode of The Bad Batch? Let me know in the comments below. Let me know also if you want to see me continue these reviews. I know they're a little different from my norm, but yeah, I'm really enjoying the show so far, and hoping to continue. And there's lots going on in the wider world outside of Star Trek right now. So as soon as Star Trek's back on the air, of course, I'll be back to reviewing and deep diving in those episodes. But in the meantime, it's kind of fun to look at some other stuff as well. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you, of course, to the Patreon supporters for all of their help in bringing these episodes to you. I could not do it without you. Thank you so very much. To everyone else, once again, thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video. And until then, as always, may the Force be with you.